When I ask you this question that why we are learning Java, why we are interested on Java programming language. Whenever we are talking about Java or object oriented programming, so Java comes in our mind first because there is one word associated with it. Platform independence, right? Java is platform independent. Everyone knows this topic. But there is one catch which is associated with this topic. Today I'm going to unfold that one because in the interview, when anyone asks you this question, why Java is platform independent, so then our answer will be there are several reasons and we are keep on answering this question. But today I will tell you one very, very important point. While compiling Java program, we have to access many components, and there exists one specific component in Java which is totally dependent on operating system. So this is the thing that I'm going to unfold. So which is the component which is dependent on operating system? And if this fact is true, then how come we can say that Java is platform independent? So now we are going to start this class. So here our topic of discussion is about Java programming compilation and knowing the components which contributes in Java program compilation, right? So I will start from this concept that is meaning of platform independence. So the meaning of platform independence is that the Java compiled code can run on all operating system. See, this is the topic from which I'm going to start. Try to understand what is the catch in today's class. Whenever anybody asks you this question, that is why Java is platform independent, then everybody will tell that Java is platform independent because it can run on any operating system. No, the first thing you have to learn is that only compiled Java code can run on any operating system. So this is the first point you have to remember. Java is platform independent. This statement is not proper. The first point you have to remember, Java compiled code can run on any operating system. Therefore, we can say that compiled Java code is platform independent. And the compiled Java code is known as bytecode. So this is the first point. So in one word, after compilation of the Java code, we will get the bytecode. This bytecode can run on any operating system and this bytecode is platform independent. Now, whenever you are writing any program in a specific language that is human readable, right? Because we use the terms like printf for printing something. So this printf is a English statement. So whenever we write any programming language, it is totally human readable language. The main content is word, phrases, etc., which the machine does not understand. So for a machine, what is the meaning of printf? Machine will not be able to comprehend this word. So for the source code to be understood by the machine, it needs to be in a language which is understood by the machine. So we have to convert this source code into a machine readable language. So the first step is, say this is our source code. Since I'm talking about Java programming language, say I'm just writing this file name as A and then the extension name will be .java, and we have some piece of instructions written over here, and all this piece of instructions means whatever word phrase we are using in this source code, they are human readable. But the problem is we want to execute this source code inside a machine, and machine will not be able to understand this piece of instructions. Now, after writing any source code, our final intention is to convert it into a machine code. So now how this conversion is possible. But before that, what I am talking about, that is after writing any source code, the immediately next step is we have to compile this source code using a compiler. For a Java programming language, there is universally one compiler present, which is known as Java C compiler. This is the name of the Java compiler. And as I have discussed, that is, whenever you are giving source code as an input to the compiler, it is producing one bytecode as an output. So bytecode is the output generated by the Java C compiler. And the property of the bytecode is this bytecode can execute on any operating system. That's why in one word we are sure that the bytecode is platform independent. But what is our intention? So up to this it is fine, but the problem is the source code is not understood by the machine. Now we have to convert this source code into the machine readable code, that is in machine code. So what we can do? So basically at this point of time we will use some more components. So, for the source code to be understood by the machine, it needs to be in a language understood by the machine. So, typically a machine level language. So, here comes the role of a compiler. So, compiler basically converts the high level language into the format understood by the machine. So, in one word, we can say that the human readable set of instruction present in the source code are known as high level language. And after compilation, whatever thing we are getting, they are understood by the machines only. So, whenever I show you this bytecode, that as a human being, you will not be able to interpret this bytecode. This bytecode will be only understood by the machine. But this is not a machine code. So now we have to extract some machine code from this also. So now the next step. So now we have to understand after achieving bytecode what we have to do. So we know that the compiler is responsible for converting source code into the bytecode. Fine. Now we can say that in one word, compiler is basically a program that translates the source code into another program which is a machine executable code. Now, this executable code may be a sequence of machine instructions that can be executed by the CPU directly, or it may be in the intermediate representation that is interpreted by the virtual machines. So, try to understand this point. Whenever I am talking about any programming language like C, C++, Java, there are two kinds of compilation. The first kind of compilation is after compilation, whatever thing you are getting from there, you can execute it. Means CPU can directly take that compiled version of the code and it can execute it directly. It may happen for one set of programming language. But in case of Java, what happens? This is the most important part. After compilation, whatever thing we are getting, that is bytecode, definitely it is understood by the machine, but this code cannot be fed into the CPU directly in order to execute it. So here at this point of time, we have to take the help of virtual machine. And since I am talking about Java programming language, so at this point of time, we will take the help of Java virtual machine. So I think this point is very much clear to you. Whenever you have some specific source code, definitely you need one compiler to get some set of instruction which is understood by the machine, right? But for some programming language, this code which is interpreted by the machine can be executed by the CPU directly. But for some code, we further need to refine this code by the help of some virtual machine to make it a proper machine code. So in case of Java, we will do this same thing. So after compilation, though we are getting a bytecode which is understood by the machine, then also we need another component at this point of time which is known as Java Virtual Machine. And this Java Virtual Machine is responsible for taking the bytecode as an input, and it will produce the machine code as an output. So, my point is here the existence or the importance of Java Virtual Machine is very much evident in the context of compilation and execution of Java programming. But today I started this class with a typical question, that is Java platform independent? Now I will unfold this topic. So here you have to remember one point. Please make a note. Whenever I am talking about Java virtual machine, from this Java virtual machine, we know that what is the actual functionality of Java virtual machine. It will be used to interpret this bytecode. It will take the bytecode as an input and produce the machine code as an output. But now we have to understand this component a little bit more details. That is, in Java, the main point here is that JVM depends on operating system. So this thing you have to make a note. So not every component of Java is independent. Whatever component I am using over here, whenever I am talking about JVM, this JVM is dependent on operating system. Means if you are running this source code in the Mac operating system, you will have different JVM than if you are running into the Windows machine or some other operating system. So this fact can be verified whenever you are trying to download this JVM. How you can verify this? So whenever you are going to install Java software, you will find that there will be different JVMs for different operating system. So this is the main point you have to understand. So download the JVM of your particular machine. When you are trying to download it, you will be given a list of JVMs corresponding to different operating system. And you will obviously pick whatever JVM is targeted for the operating system that you are running. So we can conclude that JVM is platform dependent, and it is the reason why Java is able to become platform independent. So, in one word, whenever this question is asked to you, why Java is platform independent, see, due to the existence of bytecode, Java becomes platform independent as bytecode can run any operating system. However, you have to keep in mind JVM component is operating system dependent, and you can prove it while downloading this JVM. However, overall, still Java is also known as platform independent. Now I will tell you what is the reason why, despite of operating system dependency of the Java virtual machine, Java is known as platform independent. So to understand this concept, we have to understand the details compilation process of Java source code. But up to this point, I think it is clear to you all whenever in the interview it is asked, Java is platform independent or not, then what will be your answer? Yes, Java is platform independent due to the existence of bytecode, but JVM is operating system dependent. This is the final conclusion that you have to state. Now I will give you the details. Now you have to understand how this compilation process of Java will work. So if you ask me this question, what is the basic compilation process? So I will tell you there will be one Java source code. So whenever you have Java source code, what you have to do, then you have to use Java compiler for compilation process, JavaC. And then you will get bytecode, or you can say that you will get Java bytecode. So first I will tell you what is the basic difference. So whenever you write any source code, the extension name will be .java. But whenever you are getting the bytecode, the name of the file will be same, but the extension will be .class. So whenever you get any file with .class extension, you will be able to understand that it is a bytecode and it is generated by the compiler known as JavaC. So this is the first point. So after getting the bytecode, basically there will be two parts. One part is known as Java interpreter and another part is known as bytecode compiler. And then from this bytecode compiler, you will be able to see the machine code. So now if I show you this diagram, from this diagram there will be many portion which will be unclear. Means, okay, we have got the idea that you are writing one source code, you are compiling it, we are getting a bytecode. But why we have this two division, Java interpreter and bytecode compiler? And as I have stated that whenever we are writing any source code, this source code will be written in the high level language. It is not understood by the machine. So our final aim is to create one machine code. However, this machine code is generated from the bytecode compiler. So here my point is why we need this portion. It means after generating the bytecode, there is some complex situation happening over here in order to generate the machine code. So we have to understand the exact process how we are getting the machine code while compiling the Java source code. And since this portion is very much complex to understand, so this portion is handled by a special component which is known as Java Virtual Machine. So from this to this point of time, you will have the effect of Java Virtual Machine. Now let me draw the exact diagram that you can use for Java program compilation. See, the exact diagram will look like this. This is your source code, say a.java. After getting the source code, I will use the compiler. The name of the compiler is JavaC, and then JavaC will give me one dot class file which is known as bytecode. Now see what is happening. In the previous discussion, I have explained that here we will use one component which is known as Java Virtual Machine. And I have explained this point clearly that in some programming language, after compilation, whatever we are getting, it can be fed into the CPU directly and CPU can execute it. But in case of Java, after compilation, whatever thing we are getting, it has to be fed into the virtual machine. Then only whatever thing we are getting, it will be understood by the CPU. So now see how many parts are there in Java Virtual Machine. Java Virtual Machine is divided into three parts. The first part is known as class loader. The second part is known as bytecode verifier. And the third part is known as JIT compiler. So, this type of complex situation can be handled by Java Virtual Machine using its three internal components: class loader, bytecode verifier, and JIT compiler. then only our JVM can produce a machine code. Machine code means in terms of 101. It will be able to generate machine code which is understood by the machine, and then only we can see the output, right? Now you can ask me one question, okay, why this machine code is in the form of 10, and if you are getting something into 10 format, then why it is understood by the machine? See, whenever I am talking about a machine, the computer is nothing but an electronic device, right? And for an electronic device, it will only understand on and off situation, 0 and 1. That's why whatever source code we are writing in the terms of English word or phrases, this will be known as high level language. So we have to convert this high level language in terms of zeros and ones, which is known as machine code, so that machine could understand this one, this source code, and give us some specific output. So now we have to understand what are the specific functionality of these three components which exist inside this JVM. Now let's talk about the very first component, which is known as class loader. So let's talk about class loader. So here the question is, why this bytecode is not enough? I can feed this bytecode directly into the CPU. Why not it is working? So see, this bytecode needs some extra processing. What kind of processing it needs? First, we need this class loader. What it will do? The main class is loaded into the memory by passing its dot class. Now it's a little bit confusing thing. So try to understand how this source code will look like. So whenever you find me writing any Java code, you will find that I will write one class. So what is this class? How to define it? I will tell you later on. So always you find me writing each and every set of instruction inside a class like this. And inside this class, there will be one main method. So here my point is, whichever class is holding one main method, this type of class is known as main class, right, in Java. So what is the responsibility of the class loader? The main class, this one, whichever exists in the source code, this main class is loaded into the memory, right? Because in order to execute your source code, what you need, you have to load this source code into the computer memory, right? This is our first intention. Now you cannot load this a.java file or the source code directly into the memory. So what you have to do? So we know that our source code is having the main class, and main class has the responsibility of executing all other related instructions. So basically, if we are able to load this main class which exists in the source code into the memory, then we will be able to execute our code, and this loading is only performed by this dot class file. So what is the responsibility of the bytecode or dot class file? This bytecode is responsible for loading the main class into the memory. First point, right? So that's why I'm stating that the main class is loaded into the memory by passing its dot class file to the JVM. So now here my point is, this dot class file will not be loaded directly into the memory, right? So for that purpose, we have to use one component, Java Virtual Machine. Now you can ask me one question, that what is the technicality? Why we will not be able to load this dot class file directly into the memory? I'm going into that details, but try to understand our main intention is to loading into the dot class file, but we are unable to do it. So what we are doing, dot class file of this main class we are loading into the Java Virtual Machine, right? And all the other classes, means in a Java source code we may have other classes too, means apart from main class we will have some additional supporting classes. So all the other classes referenced in the program are loaded through the class loader. So in one word, this class loader that exists inside the JVM as the first component will take the responsibility of loading all the dot class files into the memory. And why I am talking about all the dot class file? In a source code, if we have 5 files, then we will have 5 dot class corresponding to that classes. Means if we have class A, class B, and say class C. Say we have 3 classes in the source code, right? And say C is the main class. It does not imply that we will have only dot class file of this main class. We will have all the dot class files of all these classes. And this class loader will take all the dot class files and load it into the memory. So from here, loading into the memory the dot class file is not possible, right? So it is the responsibility of the class loader. Overall, we can say that it is responsibility of the Java virtual machine. So that's why this is the first importance. The first role of the Java virtual machine is loading dot class files into the memory. So this is the first responsibility. Now you have to understand one point. There are two types of class loaders. One is primordial class loader and second one is non-primordial class loader. Primordial and non-primordial. We have two types of class loader. So this primordial class loader is embedded into all the JVMs. I have already discussed for separate operating system. So different operating system will use their own Java virtual machine. So here whatever primordial class loader exists, this primordial class loader is embedded into all the JVMs and is the default class loader. So instead of talking about primordial class loader, you can say that every JVM will have one default class loader and default class loader is known as primordial class loader. And non-primordial class loader, or you can say that it's not primordial, it's a primordial, you can say that DIAL. So non-primordial class loader is a user-defined class loader which can be loaded in order to customize class loading process. Means whatever dot class file you are loading into the JVM, it can be customized. Means it can be performed by the programmer also. So at that point of time, we will use non-primordial class loaders. So non-primordial class loader, if defined, is preferred over the default one to load the classes always, because primordial has the functionality of loading only the default files. However, customized file we can load into the class loader, so always we will go for the non-primordial class loader. Anyways, if the question is asked what is the responsibility of the class loader, to load the dot class files into the memory. And class loader exists into the JVM, and we have two types of class loader: primordial class loader and non-primordial class loader. Primordial means default class loader, non-primordial means customized class loader, right? So this is all about class loader. Now we have bytecode verifier also. So why this bytecode is not going into the memory? This is another reason. So we need one bytecode verifier. This is the second component of the JVM. Now see what is the responsibility of the bytecode verifier. So after the bytecode of a class is loaded by the class loader, it has to be inspected by this bytecode verifier. Means whose job is to check that the instructions don't perform damaging actions. So This bytecode verifier has the responsibility of inspecting the content of the bytecode so that it will not create any harm to our machine. So there are some basic responsibility of this bytecode verifier. If you ask me, that first responsibility will be this bytecode verifier will check that the variables are initialized before they are used. Always we will prefer that if a variable is defined, it should be initialized by something. Means int say a is equal to 0. Proper initialization of variable is there or not, it will be checked by this bytecode verifier. So this is one of the responsibility. Second responsibility, say if in my source code we have any method calls, means whenever we are defining any specific method, this method should be called, this method should be invoked. Why method calling is required? Because in order to see the content of the method, we have to call the method. So method calls match the type of the object reference. Means whenever we are calling any method in Java, then we have to take the help of some object. So at that point of time, this bytecode verifier will check that whether method calls match the type of the object reference or not. Then the third point, rules for accessing private data. Whenever we are going to call a method, we have to take the help of an object in Java. What is object or what is method, what is calling, I will tell you later on. So this calling is performed properly or not, it is checked by the bytecode verifier. Now come to the third responsibility of the bytecode verifier. Rules for accessing private data and methods are not violated. Now, again, you have to understand whenever you are using some class or method in Java, we will use some access modifier. Access modifier means whether this method can be used publicly, whether this method can be used privately. So, we have this kind of provisions available. That is, we can set how this method or class can be accessed. So, these are known as public access specifier or private access specifier or protected access specifier. I will tell you that. So bytecode verifier, just check it. That is, rules for accessing private data and methods are not violated. Means if I am mentioning something as private, so whatever rules are there for accessing private methods, all rules must be maintained. Then we have another responsibility. Local variables access fall within the runtime stack. So I'm not going into the details. So basically the next responsibility is local variables whenever we are using. Local variables means what? I will tell you. So this kind of checking is also mentioned by the bytecode, right? So in one word, what is the responsibility of the bytecode verifier? Bytecode verifier is responsible for maintaining, checking that whether whatever rules are already set for variables, for methods, all those rules are taken care of or not. So this is the responsibility of the bytecode verifier. Now we have to come into the most interesting part, that is JIT compiler, which is known as just in time compiler. This is the third component of the Java virtual machine. So this is the final stage encountered by the Java program, and the job of the JIT compiler is to convert the loaded bytecode into the machine code. Now this is the most important question that you have to keep in mind. Who is responsible for converting the dot class file into the machine code? Your answer will be the third component, that is the just-in-time compiler of the Java virtual machine, is actually responsible for converting the bytecode into the machine code. And other two components are doing what? One is responsible for loading the dot class file into the memory, and another one is responsible for just checking the protocols or rules and protocol verification. So this component is responsible for protocol verification, but the actual task is performed by this JIT compiler. That's why just mark this word. whatever bytecodes are loaded and verified, those bytecodes are converted into the machine code by JIT compiler. Right? This point you have to keep in mind. Loaded and verified dot class files are later converted into the machine code by JIT compiler. If the bytecode is not loaded, not verified, this JIT compiler will not take any action. So when using JIT compiler, the hardware can execute the native code. Means this JIT compiler interacts with the hardware, right? So whatever code we are executing, this type of source code is converted to the machine code just only because of the existence of this JIT compiler. So this thing you have to keep in mind. Right? So what is the utility of using JVM? In one word, I can say that this can lead to the performance gain in the execution speed unless methods are executed less frequently. So if you ask me this question, why we need this JVM, I think now it is clear that instead of loading this dot class file directly into the CPU for execution, we are enforcing some additional mechanism so that we could verify the bytecode, we could inspect the bytecode, we can properly load that bytecode, then only we are converting into the machine code. So this definitely a good approach of compiling and executing any specific program, right? That's why we always prefer Java over any ancient programming language like C, C++.